The majority of people in their waking day, in a normal day, spend about 70% of their time living in stress. And living in stress is living in survival. And the actual definition of stress is when your body's knocked out of homeostasis. Stress is when your body's knocked out of balance. The stress response is what your body innately does to return itself back to order. You have three types of stress. You have physical stress, like trauma, injuries, accidents, falls. You have chemical stress, like bacteria, viruses, blood sugar levels, heavy metals in foods, hangovers, whatever. And you have emotional stress, like traffic jams, internet connections, second mortgages, single parenting, 401ks, family tragedies. All of those things knock the brain and body out of balance. Now, all organisms in nature can adapt to short-term stress. A pack of coyotes chases a deer in the forest. The deer outruns the coyotes. The stress is over. The deer returns back to homeostasis and it grazes again. The event is over. When the deer perceives a threat in this external environment, it turns on a primitive nervous system called the fight or flight nervous system. And that autonomic nervous system, that sympathetic nervous system, begins to mobilize enormous amounts of energy for some threat in the external environment. Now, deer has all its physiology changed, all the blood is sent to the extremities, heart rate increases, respiratory rate increases, pupils dilate. The 1,300 chemicals that are created in a matter of seconds is to cause the deer to survive in some difficult condition. Now, human beings have the same mechanisms, and when we perceive a threat in our external environment, like a lion, we are going to run or fight or freeze. But if you've had problems with your coworker, or you've had a very difficult experience with your mother-in-law, the moment you perceive your mother-in-law or your coworker, you have a past experience with them, you're going to turn on the same primitive nervous system, just like you're being chased by a lion. So what was once highly adaptive now becomes very maladaptive, because when you're mobilizing all of that energy, you are going to operate in very predictable ways. You're going to be an amped up animal with a big memory bank. So that your blood flow is going to go to the hindbrain and away from the forebrain, which means you're going to react instead of think, rationalize. But human beings, the privilege of being a human being is that we can make thought more real than anything else. That's the privilege. So then you can begin to forecast some future worst case scenario. And you can attend to that thought to the exclusion of everything else. And you can focus on it to such a degree that you will begin to anticipate the event and produce the same chemicals as if you were in that experience. And you're knocking your brain and body out of balance just by thought alone. You can begin to unfold some past bitter memory that's tattooed in the recesses of your gray matter. And like magic, you can bring it to life. And in that moment, it's real. And you will produce the same chemistry in your brain and body as if that event occurred. And your body, as the unconscious mind, is literally living that experience. So then, when we're living by the hormones of stress, and you turn on that stress response, and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for some disease. Because no organism in nature can tolerate living in emergency mode for extended periods of time. So if 70% of the time a person's living in survival, living in stress, in survival, what we do in order to survive is we are going to select the worst case scenario. And we are going to begin to plan our behaviors and our emotions in that experience, because anything less than the worst case scenario means we have better chances of survival. So we plan for the worst, we emotionally embrace it, and anything less means we can survive. So out of the infinite potentials in the quantum field, anxiety really represents a poor imagination, but it's highly adaptive if you're living in survival, because you got to get ready for that. So 70% of the time, people are selecting the worst case event in their life and emotionally embracing it, and they're programming their autonomic nervous system into a very specific destiny. And it turns out if you keep doing that and you create the emotions of fear and worry and anxiety, and you do that for 10 years or 5 years or 3 years, your body is going to unconsciously become programmed to fear. And it's going to have a panic attack without you. Try as you may with your conscious mind to control it. You've programmed it subconsciously. And now the body as the mind is running the show. So, the hormones of stress create the emotions of anger, of aggression, of hostility, of violence, of frustration, of hatred, of fear, of anxiety, of guilt, of shame, of hopelessness, of powerlessness, depression. Those are all chemicals that are derived from the hormones of stress. And when we live by the hormones of stress, we become very selfish. Why? Because when you're in survival, you got to take care of the self. Your attention is on your body, right? Your attention is on your external environment. There's predators out there. The rush of adrenaline causes the senses to become heightened. You're a materialist, and you're trying to predict the future because there's better chances of survival if you can predict the future based on the past. When that occurs then, over time, the body begins to break down because it's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress downregulate genes to create disease in the long term. So if you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and the hormones of stress can make you sick, then your thoughts can literally make you sick. So the question is, if your thoughts can make you sick, is it possible then that your thoughts can make you well? My definition of addiction is something that you can't stop, right? And most people who struggle from addictions are trying to regulate and alter their internal state. Now, you and I have been hypnotized and conditioned into believing that change happens outside of us. People are looking for something outside of them to change their internal state. It's kind of a Newtonian principle. You wait for your wealth to come to feel abundant. You wait for your healing to occur to feel wholeness. You wait for your success to show up so you feel empowered. You wait for your new relationship to show up to feel love. You're waiting for the event outside of you to happen to change how you feel inside of you. That's cause and effect. And we're conditioned based on consumerism and marketing and programming that that's the way it works. To get something to relieve yourself. And the problem with that is that people begin to confuse true happiness with pleasure, and they're not the same thing. So people who have addictions like that typically have had some very difficult past experiences that have branded them emotionally, and they just don't know how to change. They just don't know, and they're just looking for some relief inside of them so that they can make that feeling go away. So we can become distracted by our external environment for a period of time, But then when you realize that the sports car or the new wardrobe or the vacation or the whatever people do to try to make the feeling go away, the novelty of that thing outside of us wears off because we're trying to re-identify with our environment. And that goes away. The next thing that people do is they look for some immediate change. And so they take a drug. They drink something, they gamble, they watch pornography, and the event outside of them changes their internal chemistry. And the moment they notice that the pain or the emptiness goes away, the moment they feel differently, they look to see what caused it. And this is when the attachment begins. Here's the problem, though. The rush of chemical change that takes place, the pleasure centers in the brain, there's a huge release of the pleasure chemicals. And the release, the intensity of those release of those chemicals begins to desensitize the receptor sites in the brain. So as the brain chemicals are released and the receptor sites become desensitized, the next time you gamble, the next time you take the drug, the next time you shop, you need a little bit more the next time. So then what happens is the pleasure centers start to get recalibrated to a higher and higher level. So you're always going to need more to make that feeling go away. Sounds like an addiction to me. And so people get lost because then without the dependency on that external substance, the body, which has become the mind, is craving its relief. And so an addiction really is when the body is the mind. So you may say with your conscious mind, I want to give up drinking, I want to give up pornography, I want to give up gaming, I want to give up over shopping, I want to give it up consciously. But the body has been conditioned from the past subconsciously. And so now the body's the mind. Now, no one's told people that true change can happen within them. And so then, when people start to realize that there's a gap between the external world and how they present themselves to the world and their attention on the outer world and their attention on their inner world and how they really feel, and if they're spending the majority of their time looking outside of them for change and they don't want to look at this feeling, all they want to do is make that feeling go away, they're going to wind up in trouble. So true change is when you start looking within and you become conscious of your unconscious thoughts. In neuroscience, it's called metacognition. You become aware of your habits and your unconscious behaviors. And you look at those emotions that are connected to past experiences and allow yourself to observe them. So then think about this. If 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old are those programmed states, the moment you're observing how you think, how you act, and how you feel, it means you're no longer the program. You're now a consciousness observing the program, and you're beginning to objectify your subjective self. You are seeing yourself through the eyes of someone else. Turns out that the size of the frontal lobe, the crowning achievement of the human being, 40% of our entire brain, that's what separates us from all other species. It's the boss, it's the CEO, it's the conscience, it's the creative center. It's what speculates possibilities, it's what learns from its mistakes, it's what has intention, attention, regulates and controls behaviors and emotional reactions. When your forebrain begins to turn on, when that begins to happen, you are now beginning to become the executive in your life. You're starting to gain more control over your life. If you're living primarily as the body-mind, then the hindbrain is looking for some chemical relief. So by the mere fact that you can begin to observe who you're being, means you can modify who you are to do a better job in life.
We are continuing with the practice of completing the inspiring and well-known quotes at the end of every video. In the previous video we were looking for two words. The quote was Joe Dispenza's and it goes like this. It's true that our brain is shaped and molded by our environment, but what science is beginning to realize is that our brain is shaped and molded by our ability to, and the correct answer is pay attention. So it's true that our brain is shaped and molded by our environment, but what science is beginning to realize is that our brain is shaped and molded by our ability to pay attention. I want to congratulate to everyone with the correct answer, especially to the first one with the correct answer. I hope you like this way of ending the videos and engaging together. Joe Dispenza has many beautiful statements and quotes. You probably heard it many times before, since you're a Joe Dispenza fan. So I'm sure you'll know the one I have for you today. Today's quote or statement that you need to complete comes from Dr. Joe Dispenza also, and we are looking for two words. I'm sure you'll know the correct answer. The quote goes like this. Gratitude becomes the emotional signature that it's already happened. Gratitude is the ultimate state. Write your answers in the comments below the video. Even if you're not sure what the correct answer is, try and guess. And while you're writing, tell me also what you think about this video. Don't miss my new videos and new quotes that need to be answered correctly. So subscribe and hit that bell button and don't miss any of the new videos. If you really like what we do here and want to support us, you can join our channel and our community for a symbolic fee and gain many other additional features. You can do that by clicking the join button next to the subscribe button, or you can click on the link in the